call Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I rise with pleasure to speak in the second reading of the Corrections Amendment Bill, and perhaps I will cover off some of the issues raised by the previous speaker. And I think we have to just acknowledge and note that Labor is ideologically opposed to any kind of private management of the prison system. That is a given. It was a view expressed in the Select Committee, and it is no surprise to us. But I guess you have to ask yourself why they are so ideologically opposed. And if you reflect back to when Labor was in government in 2008 and in the previous 9 years to that, they left the corrections and the criminal justice system in disarray. And so they were working in an environment where they were actually struggling with not only their criminal justice system but with their correction system. It lacked accountability. There was no focus in particular on victims. There was a critical shortage of prison beds. That was corrected by the Honourable Judith Collins when she was Minister of Corrections, and she brought in the double bunking containers, which actually, if you have a look at them, are a great solution. And when the committee members were at Rimataka Prison and we spoke to the prisoners in the containers, they were happy with them. They were snug, they were warm, they felt safe, and this is a government which faced up to the issues that we were left with by the previous Labor government. So I guess it's no surprise that they were unable to face up to the challenges that they had while they were in government. Gangs and organised crime were on the rise. The P problem was absolutely out of control, and that government had absolutely no answer to it. And in contrast, Mr Speaker, since National has been in power, public confidence in corrections is 53% higher than it was when this government took the Treasury benches. So that's 53% higher confidence in corrections. So that's not a bad record. Positive random drug tests were at a record low last year. That was down from 13% in 2008 to just 4% in the last financial year. And so changes in this bill will make it even harder to get drugs into prison. I want to talk about strip searching. We know that Labor are ideologically opposed and always will be to the possibility that anybody else can run a prison other than corrections. But the issue of strip searching was one which our committee looked very carefully at, and the provisions in this bill standardise the procedure for strip searching. The reasons for doing that were many, but just two I want to highlight. One of them is that a prisoner naturally does not look forward to the prospect of being strip searched, whether they are returning from work or they have been to a court appearance, or whether they're going into a high dependency union. Of course they don't. And it's fair to say that corrections staff don't look forward to the procedure either. So there is a fair amount, it would be fair to say, of anxiety around the whole strip searching procedure. Now, the prisoner doesn't know the form of the strip search at the moment, so it might be the very intrusive strip search or it might be the less intrusive strip search. They don't know which one it is to be. So by standardising the search, that uncertainty is ramped down just a few notches, and the prisoner knows what they're going to face on their return to prison for whatever reason. And the second reason is the nature of the strip search. By using lights and mirrors so that the corrections officer can have a look at the areas he needs to look at or she needs to look at, that places the distance between the officer and the prisoner. There is a less physical contact and proximity between them. That also serves to ramp down the tensions and anxiety for the prisoners and the corrections officers, and at the same time increases the safety. Well, the member says exactly the opposite, and I beg to differ. So this bill, Mr Speaker, is intended to reduce the barriers to effectiveness and efficiencies in prison. It does that. We received, as the Minister said, some amendments which we looked at carefully throughout the course of our examination of this bill. and that was to allow the Department of Corrections to require a phone company to provide it with the personal unlock key or the keys to SIM cards within legislative parameters, allowing prison managers to authorise non-custodial staff to read prisoners' mail. Now, what that means is that the prison manager can appoint a staff member who has the appropriate training to read prisoners' mail. That means that corrections staff don't have to go through that function, thus releasing them for other duties. Requiring that drinking water being made available to prisoners be of a standard reasonably equivalent to that supplied to the public. And by the way, that also supports a provision in the bill of making waterboarding before a urine test a punishable action. Requiring that any prisoner being segregated because of risk of self-harm be strip searched on admission to an at-risk unit. And you'd think, well, a prisoner who's at risk of self-harm is pretty upset, and yes, they are. It's also worth noting we were told that a prisoner can do damage to themselves with a paperclip, and have done in the past. So it is necessary to do strip searches at that time, and allowing the department to keep recordings of prisoners' phone calls for up to 2 years instead of 6 months to help before having to erase them, except in some defined circumstances, and that just aids to the efficient running of our prison system. Mr. Speaker, this was good consideration of this bill in the second reading, and I commend it to the House.
The Honourable Fulgoff.
Mr. Chair.